Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're just going to give it a few seconds to let everyone come in from the waiting room. Okay, so thank you everyone so much for joining us today. I'm Judy. I'm the Executive Director of F.E.A.S.T, and we're thrilled that you're joining us for this webinar. I just want to go through a few housekeeping rules before we start. Please make sure to keep yourselves muted and to keep your cameras off through the entire duration of the webinar. And use the chat box for questions. Some questions will be answered during the presentation. Some will be answered after the presentation, but feel free, as soon as a question pops in your head, just stick it in the chat box and we'll get to it. And now I'd like to welcome our speakers for today. So the topic is relapse and eating disorders and navigating the challenges in supporting recovery. It is obviously a very hot topic because we had record registration for this webinar. And I'd like to thank our speakers for today, Dr. Jamie Pennesi and Dr. Anna-Marie Ortiz, for joining us. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and get started.
Hi, so my name is Jamie Pennesi. I'm a postdoctoral associate in the Eating Anxiety Treatment Lab at the University of Louisville, and that's in Louisville in Kentucky in the United States. I've been working in eating disorders for about 10 years. I've worked both as a clinician treating eating disorders as well as in eating disorder research where I am currently, and I'm currently working on a large trial focused on relapse prevention for eating disorders. So that's me, Anna-Marie.
Yes, my name is Anna-Marie Ortiz. I am also a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Louisville in the EAT lab, and also working on a personalized treatment study as well. And yeah, we're both really excited to be here with you all today and talking about relapse prevention.
So I'll go ahead and share my slides and just check that everyone can see them. Can everyone see my slides? Cool.
Jamie, it looks like you're on we can see the presenter view.
Okay, sorry about that. Let's see. Technical difficulties always. Did that change anything?
Great.
Okay, awesome. So you can't see the presenter view now? Cool. Okay, so we're going to be talking about relapse and eating disorders. Before we get started, we'd love to get a sense of who we have with us. So I know we've got quite a large audience and we weren't expecting so many people, but it's fantastic. But we'd love to know who we have. So if you don't mind in the chat, putting in who you are. Are you someone with an eating disorder, someone on the road to recovery? Are you a parent, a carer, guardian, family member, a loved one, a friend, a care provider, or anybody else? We'd love to hear. Great, we got some parents, therapists, parents, a lot of parents, that's fantastic. Dietitian, fantastic. Therapist, researcher. Great, so we've got a bit of a mix of care providers, parents, loved ones. Fantastic.
Wonderful.
Great. That's wonderful. And the reason why we're asking is just we want to try to cater this to, the audience that we have. We have developed this webinar in mind that we would probably have a lot of loved ones present. And we also wanted to also provide on the other end, in case I didn't see anybody in the chat say this, but in case we do have folks that themselves are currently struggling with an eating disorder or is on the road to recovery, we wanted to provide some information in terms of relapse prevention on that end, but also we think it's really important for carers and loved ones to also know what is important for the individual in terms of relapse prevention as well, because we know that just simply being aware of what they need to do is really helpful from a carer and loved one's perspective. Cool. So You're the experts of your own experiences, so we really do want to hear from you during this presentation. We don't want necessarily, I keep calling it presentation, we don't want it to just be a presentation. We want to be this to be collaborative and interactive as much as possible. So please feel free to jump in with questions in the chat or feedback along the way. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, just a bit of a brief summary. We're going to start with a brief background on relapse and eating disorders. We're going to provide a summary of relapse prevention. We're going to discuss what to consider when developing a relapse prevention plan. So we're going to talk about things like times of high risk, or also called triggers. We're going to talk about early warning signs and how to address them. We're going to talk about dealing with setbacks. We're also going to importantly provide a number of practical tips and strategies to help to prevent a relapse. So we'll spend a bit of time on that. And we'll give those both from the perspective of someone on the road to recovery, so an individual, as well as from a loved one's perspective, if you are helping someone who is on the road to recovery. And then we also provide some additional supports and resources at the end, and we will hopefully have time for questions at the end. Now, we understand that everyone's coming in at a different point. You might be currently helping someone on the road to recovery. You may have been there for a while. You may be kind of going through treatment with someone at the moment, and they're hoping to kind of move towards recovery. So we're really trying to provide information in this webinar that can kind of meet people where they are. But please understand also there may be things that you may have heard already if you have done any of this work before. But yeah, we're trying to cater for everyone in this. Okay, Anna-Marie.
Great. So as you all know, recovery from an eating disorder is not easy by any means. It takes a great deal of courage and strength, perseverance, hard work, and support as well. And most people don't recover from an eating disorder without having a few slip-ups or occasional setbacks. And this is normal and expected and okay. So today we're going to talk about how to plan for and to navigate these setbacks. So first, we'll start by just distinguishing between what is a lapse and what's a relapse. So a lapse we think of as like a temporary slip or return to a problematic behavior. This is typically seen as like an isolated occurrence, whereas a relapse is when an individual goes back to the disordered eating and weight control behaviors and is seen as more of a pattern of behaviors. So it's not uncommon, like I mentioned, for people who have recovered from an eating disorder to relapse. So in fact, up to 60% of people who recover from an eating disorder will relapse within the first 1 to 2 months after treatment. So the best way to therefore prevent relapse is through relapse prevention. And this is a cognitive behavioral approach that's used in treatment in order to identify and prevent the high-risk situations such as reemergence of problematic eating and weight control behaviors, or negative thoughts about eating, body, weight, and shape. And relapse prevention involves a personalized plan. And while this is normally developed during the course of treatment or towards the end of treatment, this also can be something that you can create with your loved one at home. So for the best chances of success, relapse prevention plan should broadly include, things such as like early warning signs, triggers, high-risk situations specific to you or your loved one, and then how to deal with those so you can be prepared and ready to deal with any setbacks that do come up along the way. Okay. And so it's important for you and your loved one, first of all, to make sure you're having realistic expectations about their disordered eating and weight control behaviors after treatment and throughout the course of their recovery. It's not uncommon for there to be hopes that all eating disorder behaviors and habits will be completely eradicated, will be completely gone at the termination of treatment. But unfortunately, people with eating disorders will always be vulnerable to some extent to disordered eating and weight control behaviors to some degree. And so even if an individual has stopped engaging in these behaviors, it's important to consistently be on the lookout for warning signs that these behaviors might be starting to creep back in a bit. So that's why it's important that we have this relapse prevention plan ready to go, ready to be able to draw from, so that when these behaviors do start to reemerge, that we will be ready to face them head on. So let's talk about issues that you need to consider when putting together a relapse prevention plan. Okay, so first thing to consider is times of high risk. So these are situations that make it harder to engage in or to stick to helpful behaviors that to help to keep you or your loved one well. So these are types of situations that could potentially trigger a setback in your eating disorder and in the future. So for example, it might be harder to challenge negative or unhelpful thinking, or it might be harder to follow a maintenance plan when you or your loved one are feeling stressed or upset or are in these times of higher risk. Okay, so for example, these could include times such as, times when there's weight gain or weight loss, high stress, exams in school, feeling sad, anxious, or lonely, losing a loved one, or navigating the holidays. Okay, so now we're curious to hear from you all if there have been times that you've identified that are particularly tricky for you or your loved one, that makes them more vulnerable. So this would be, specific times when it's harder for them to stick to treatment or maintenance plans. Okay, yeah, transitions like going off to college, definitely big transitions, vacations, traveling, visitors over, definitely stress in the household, definitely. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of like transitions, unexpected stressors coming up, losing routine, definitely. Yeah, so it sounds like these are great examples of some of these times that can make the eating disorder really more challenging to resist engaging in the urges. Yes, definitely hearing talk about other people's dieting behaviors, definitely. Yes, unstructured time. Yeah, so yes, exactly. So, really like a lot of big transitions here, things that could come up along the way too, of like other examples would be like, pregnancy, illnesses, moving out. I think someone mentioned that in the chat as well, disappointments. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to switch us over? Thank you.
Oh, so I'll jump in. So the next important thing to consider is early warning signs. So these are signs that warn you or a loved one of possible setbacks or slipping. So these signs can warn you that that problematic behaviors, like such as eating and weight control behaviors, are creeping back in, and that you need to try to prevent them and intervene right away. Recognizing these problems early is essential to keeping you or your loved one on track. And the better you become at detecting these signs, the better the chances of you or your loved one staying well. So some common warning signs may include skipping meals, avoiding situations that involve food, so social eating occasions, weighing more often, so more frequent weighing, so could be multiple times daily, an increasing need for control, or trying to be perfect, and the list kind of can go on. And these can be like emotional, thinking, behavioral, or physical signs, and really anything can be a warning sign. And I just want to make it clear that because later it will kind of make a bit more sense, but a behavior can be both an early warning sign, and it could also be a disordered eating behavior for someone. And that will become clear in a little bit, and we'll talk a bit more about that. Okay, so we'd love to hear from everyone again. Can you identify early warning signs that may be relevant to you or your loved one? These could be, past experiences that you or your loved one may have had, thinking about things that may have happened right before their last setback, something that may have triggered their problems reemerging. Those may be early warning signs. So if you feel comfortable, please include in the chat. Okay, so triggering comments, yes. Increasing exercise. Secretly throwing away snacks, skipping meals or snacks, being isolated, comparing themselves to others and their bodies, particularly in sporting occasions, feeling hopeless. Yeah. Fast walking, so kind of again, increasing in exercise. That's a good one. Reloading, triggering applications with nutrition information. Yeah, those are all great examples. Restricting, not being able to sit still. Fantastic. Thank you so much for all of those examples. Yeah, there really are a whole range of things that could be early warning signs. And even in the examples that have been provided, they, there could be thoughts, there could be behaviors, all kinds of things. Weight loss, another one, yes. So now that we've identified early warning signs, we can create a plan for dealing with them. So it's really important to create a plan ahead of time so that you're prepared and ready to face them when they happen. First, you need to identify when to act. So having a clear understanding of what early warning signs are, that will help to determine when you need to act. So when you do this and try to identify them, it's really important to describe each one and be really specific and as detailed as you can so that you know what to look out for. So for example, if a warning sign for you or your loved one is weighing more often, it may be a problem if you find yourself or your loved one checking their weight twice in a day or on consecutive days. That might be an increase in a warning sign. Another example is if a warning sign was skipping meals. It may be a problem then if 2 meals were skipped in a day. So it really is specific to that individual, but those are really good things to look out for. Second, once you've recognized the need to act, you need to act immediately. So don't wait for the problem to get worse. It's much easier to deal with an early warning sign than it is to deal with a full-blown disordered eating behavior. And then third and finally is having a plan. You need to really create a personal plan for you or your loved one for dealing with early warning signs so you can try to intervene early before they become worse. So now I want to go through a few brief examples. Okay, so as a first example, what if an early warning sign for your loved one is the thought such as, I am fat? So what you want to do is critically examine this thought. You can ask yourself or a loved one, where did this thought come from? Is it rational? Is there evidence to support it? Is this thought helpful? So for parents in the audience, obviously these ones will be ones that you could ask, or think about with your loved one. If there are folks in the audience that themselves are going through a difficult time or trying to get onto the road to recovery, these are questions you can ask yourself, but you can work together to answer these questions. Okay, how about another example? So in this case, skipping meals, which is the behavior. What you want to do is critically examine this behavior. So some questions that you can ask yourself or your loved one would be, why are you doing it? Do you need to do it? Does it make you feel better or worse? What are the consequences of engaging that behavior? What happens as a result? And is this in line with your maintenance plan? So really, you and your loved one can use the answer to these questions, and these are only 2 examples of many, but you can use the answer to these questions to then help you to develop a personalized plan to address the warning signs. So it's a little bit more concrete. We want to go through an example of what this might look like together. So, and then we want to actually do a couple if we have time. I think we should have enough time for a couple together from the audience. So this is just a very, very brief, simple table that you can use to address early warning signs. This is something that can be done both in treatment with a care provider, but it can also be something that you yourself can do, or you can do with a loved one. It can be done on pen and paper, in a Word document, on a phone, notes in your phone. Really, it's basic for a reason and it's easy to use. But here we just have 4 columns, what the early warning sign is, whether it is a thought, behavior, or something else, how you can challenge it, and then developing a plan. So following this first example that we have here, what the early warning sign is skipping meals. Skipping meals is a behavior. And then in thinking, okay, what are some things that you can do or tell yourself to challenge that behavior? In this example, skipping meals makes me more likely to binge eat. So that's trying to challenge the behavior. And then in terms of developing a plan, and this is something, again, you do together with your loved one, is to try to keep to regular eating. That could be one thing that they could do to try to avoid skipping meals. And then in this example in particular, it's talking about around holiday time. So even though I'll eat more around the holidays, it's really important that I try to keep to regular eating. So that is just one example of how you can use a brief table like this to develop a plan to address an early warning sign. Like I said, early warning signs can be a whole myriad of things. So what we would like to do is to open up to the audience to try to come up with a couple examples and actually fill out this table together. So I'm going to get a text box started and hope this works. But audience members, if you don't mind in the chat, providing an example of an early warning sign that we could use together to do this table. Okay. Great. The first one here is body checking. That's a good one. Okay. And if we have, I know we have some other examples too. If we have time, we can go through another one as well. Some other examples that people provided were water loading, over exercising, measuring, all good examples of early warning signs. Thank you. So, okay. So if body checking is our early warning sign, what is this? What is body checking? Is it a thought, a behavior? Is it something else? This one's a pretty straightforward one. Yes, it's a behavior. Okay, so what is something that you can do or say to yourself to be able to challenge the idea of body checking, similar to the way that we did with skipping meals in the first example? This one is a little bit more challenging in terms of coming up with, yeah. So someone's talked about, asking yourself, is this useful? Kind of going back to some of the questions that we asked ourselves before. Asking yourself, does it make me happy? And I guess the challenging part in that is if the answer to these questions is no, it's not useful, and actually no, it makes me feel worse. And I love one of the comments in there, which I think is also really challenging, is the idea that checking will make me more likely to continue to check. That's fantastic. Okay, so I think we can leave that one there. So let's now try to develop a plan to try to address body checking as an early warning sign? What could you do to try to make it less likely for that to happen? Try to address body checking. So someone said like an example of stroking a dog. So I guess that could be summarized in do something else. With your hands or I guess body. Removing mirrors and that would be a helpful one if it was mirror checking that you're engaging in, because there's a number of different forms of checking. Yes, thank you. So pinching is another example of checking. You can definitely check in the mirror, measuring. So you could do something else with your hands or your body, remove kind of the things such as mirrors, if that's what is used for checking. You can potentially limit the amount of times if it is something that you're trying to cut down on. Yeah, those are all great things. Okay, how about, I think we have enough time to do another example. So how about we do another example? What is another example of an early warning sign that is not skipping meals? And I might be able to scroll back to see what some of the other examples were previously. How about one of the first examples was over exercising? What about if we do that? Oops, if I can actually spell. Okay, so if the early warning sign is over exercising, is that a thought, a behavior, or something else? This one, I guess, is another pretty straightforward one. It's a behavior. And what is something that we can do or say to ourselves to be able to challenge over exercising, similar to what we did in the other two examples? And thank you so much for participation in the chat as well. It really helps to make this a bit more interactive. Yep, so is asking yourself, is this taking care of my body? Can I use opposite action? Asking myself, am I healthy enough? Another one I'd like to add in is this in line with my treatment plan? So for example, and I think this is brought up in the chat earlier, is if someone has been asked not to engage in exercise, or perhaps they're not medically stable enough to be able to engage in exercise. So, you know, that certainly over-exercising would certainly not be in line. Yeah, so some great ideas coming through the chat. Is this doing more harm than good? I've noticed you're very tired lately. Is this level of exercise helpful? So these are all fantastic examples. Perhaps we can leave that there. What is something that we could do in terms of developing a plan to help to address over-exercising? So moving in a gentle way. I love that idea. Such as yoga. Yep. Reducing the amount, definitely. Limiting the number of times. Because there is a difference between over-exercising and some sort of movement, or movement that's appropriate for your body at this stage. Engaging in fun activities. Yep. perhaps doing something with someone else. Oh, these are all great ideas. So there's many different ways in which you can develop a plan. And really this is you working with your loved one, potentially on being able to create this plan together. Okay, so let's see. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Now it's going to ask me to clear my drawings. Okay, cool. So it's likely that, thank you so much for all of that, those helpful examples. So it's very likely that your loved one will experience slips or minor setbacks. They're actually very common, as we talked about before. So this is not talking about now a early warning sign. This is talking about actual reemergence of disordered eating or weight control behaviors. For example, something like re-engaging in binge eating and purging. It's really important to think about setbacks as a lapse that Anna-Marie talked about before, not relapse. Just because you or your loved one has had a slip doesn't mean that they've fallen back into old disordered eating or weight control behaviors, doesn't mean that they've failed, doesn't mean they're going backwards. It simply is a lapse, a temporary slip. It's really important to try and take a step back when this happens and try to critically examine the situation. So taking more of a bird's eye view, trying to examine the lapse as if it was you looking in as an observer. And you can do this as a parent or a loved one as well, but like watching someone else engaging in this and taking that bird's eye view. So if we look at this in an example together, for example, going back to binge eating and purging as a reemergence of a disordered eating behavior, you could ask yourself or your loved one what led to the lapse. Were there any warning signs that you could have noticed earlier before it kind of turned into kind of a worsening of a behavior and the full-blown kind of binge eating and purging behavior? What could have been done to prevent the lapse? Could there have been kind of engagement earlier on when those warning signs appeared, potentially having a plan there to prevent this from happening? Asking what could be done better next time? And kind of using it as a learning opportunity when this happens. And also then thinking about what steps can be taken now to get back on track again in the future. So similar to what we did before, now we have a slightly different table here for dealing with setbacks. Again, this is very simple, straightforward table. Again, this is referring to actual reemergence of disordered eating or weight control behaviors, no longer talking about the warning signs. Now, this table I know looks very similar to the previous table, but this is now addressing actual reemergence of behaviors or worsening of behaviors. But really, both of these tables can be used together to both address early warning signs and dealing with setbacks. And again, this is very simple. You can, pen and paper if you need to, whatever's going to work for you. And I forgot to mention, we will actually give everyone a copy of the slides once this is finished. And yes, I can also send through a basic template of these tables as well. But yeah, so again, this is something that can be done in treatment, but it can also be something that you can do yourselves with your loved ones. So in this table with dealing with setbacks, we've got what is the lapse behavior. In this example, it was I have binged and purged. The next column is what led to the lapse. So what happened in the lead up to that? It could be like, I'm not sure. It can be sometimes difficult to identify what happened immediately before, perhaps restricting. And then, okay, I did skip a meal earlier today. I had, I missed breakfast, for example. The next column is what could I do differently in the future? So an example, and this is kind of similar to the plan in the previous table that we worked through, but what you could do differently in the future is engaging in regular eating, making sure to not miss that breakfast or not missing a meal that day. And then also just thinking about remembering both everyday foods and occasional foods are okay. That could be another way to kind of think about things differently in the future. And then finally, what do I need to do to get back on track? So remembering this is when actually it has there has been a reoccurrence of a disordered eating behavior. So what do we need to do to get back on track? So firstly, eat regularly, making sure to not miss any meals, potentially eating mindfully, eating slowly, and then perhaps even putting food on the plate first and only eating what's on the plate rather than kind of going back and it turning into a binge. So that's just one example. I'd love to do another couple examples as a group again. So in the chat, if you wouldn't mind giving me an example of what potentially a lapse behavior could be, and we can do that as an example together. Okay, how about, now we used skipping meals earlier, so why don't we, weight loss, that's a different one. How about we do weight loss? So if the lapse behavior was weight loss, and it could be intentional or unintentional, what led to the lapse? What potentially could have caused a lapse to occur? Restricting, yeah. I hope that was an example. It wasn't a lapse behavior, but it also works for this one as well. So actually restricting, it could be a triggering comment. Could be stress. An illness, yep. Let's see something. So seeing your weight. Yeah, all really great examples. There's a whole lot of things that could have potentially led to weight loss. And in that, those examples, we have some of that are like, could be intentional, unintentional. So it could be either way. Okay, so what are things that now we could do differently in the future to kind of prevent that or prevent the effects of that weight loss? Now, obviously, things like being unwell and like having the flu, for example, is hard. No one wants to be sick and become unwell, but so those ones might be a little bit harder to do something differently. But what about things like the restricting or, stress or seeing your weight? Yep, accountability. Speaking to a friend. Yeah. Sticking to your meal plan. Great. Eating with someone else to help with that accountability. Yeah. These are great examples. So those are all things that can be done differently or, as a learning opportunity. Remember, this is trying to learn from this. So next time that happens, or even to prevent that from happening in the future, these things can be used. Okay, and then what do I need to do now to get back on track? So weight loss has occurred, whether it be intentional or unintentional. What can I do now to get back on track? Yep, follow a meal plan. Use available resources and supports that you have around you, yes. Talk about it. Yeah, that can definitely be helpful. Talking with a care provider, talking with a loved one. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Just in terms of time, I do want to progress, and so we won't do another example, but yeah, that's super helpful and hopefully helpful to go through an example together. And I will clear. Okay.
Okay, great. Yes. So next, just want to talk about different things to be keeping in mind when you are having these more challenging conversations with your loved one. So, things to be keeping in mind if you do suspect, that there is potentially some eating disorder concerns arising again, and you feel that that you should address them with your loved one. Important to keep in mind to really take a non-judgmental stance when bringing up these topics with your loved one, and come from a place of curiosity as opposed to accusations or assumptions. Using like a lot of I statements, like I've noticed, or I feel like X, Y, and Z, making sure we're, setting us up so that your loved one, reducing chances of becoming defensive and shutting down, really highlighting the concerns and your concerns in a supportive, non-accusatory way, being patient, and really encouraging new learning to continue to happen even after the termination of treatment. And also just curious if you all, like we said at the beginning, you all are experts of your own experience and have a lot of wisdom to share. So curious if in your experience, what has been helpful in terms of navigating these difficult conversations with your loved one, if there's anything that you all have found particularly helpful when trying to bring these up with your loved ones. If you want to put it in the chat, if there's anything. Yes, discussing gains made so far. So really trying to highlight and emphasize the progress that's been made. Focusing on listening, opening up the floor. Not waiting till the intensity of the moment has passed, so that everyone's in a clear headspace and able to handle the emotions that will likely arise with regards to this kind of conversation. Okay, sending a text. Maybe giving someone a heads up so they don't feel as caught off guard. Nonviolent communication. Okay, so a good resource for a book. Reminding the person that you love and care for them, and that you're there to support them. And remembering that, if the eating disorder has really come back with a vengeance and kind of taken over, that remembering that eating like logic oftentimes just doesn't work with the eating disorder. So keeping that in mind too. These are all great suggestions. Okay.
Perhaps I should unmute myself. So I'm going to walk through some more practical tips and strategies for preventing relapse. And so again, here we're going to be talking about providing information from the perspective of someone who is on the road to recovery, so the individual, as well as a loved one. And I'll try to emphasize, because I think we have more loved ones in the audience, I'll try to emphasize that a little bit more. But we may not go through all of these just in the interest of time, but we will have a copy of the slides available for everyone afterwards. So the first one is to develop a support system. So for someone on the road to recovery, it's really important that you surround yourself with people who care, love, encourage, and support you, and people that have your best interests in mind. These may be friends, family members, loved ones, even your care providers. It's helpful to find people in your life who you can talk through things with. Could be like, what's going on in your life, just generally. But it may be also helpful to have, one or more people that are aware of your eating disorder journey. Now, I know we have a lot of parents in the audience, so you may be aware of, the eating disorder journey of your loved one, but it may also be helpful to have others who are kind of in the loop. And better still, people that are maybe aware of the individual's maintenance or relapse prevention plan as well. And these people are really going to be able to help the individual when they're struggling. And while it's not always easy to ask, you should always ask for help when you need it. Lean into your support networks. That's what they're there for. And then for a loved one, it's really helpful to help your loved one to establish a supportive environment and a reliable support system, so they can have that around them at all times. Let them know that they're not alone in their journey. Try to help your loved one if and when they're struggling or going through a hard time, and try your best to be there for your loved one when they ask for your help. And remember that it may have taken them a lot to ask for your help. And simply just reach out. If you're not in, a parent living with potentially a loved one going through eating disorder, say you're a friend or a loved one that's not kind of in close proximity, just reaching out and checking in to your loved one, just to see how things are going. Ask if they're okay. Ask if they need any support. The next one is having realistic expectations. So for someone on the road to recovery, remembering that your vulnerability to disordered eating and weight control behaviors will likely be there forever. Consistently being on the lookout for warning signs that these behaviors are creeping back in. And when they do reemerge, being ready and prepared to face them. So having a plan, a relapse prevention plan already prepared. Just remembering that progress is not linear. It often comes with many ups and downs and twists and turns, but that's okay. That is part of recovery. And then for a loved one, you can also really help by being on the lookout for warning signs, and being ready to help and support your loved one to get back on track when those early warning signs appear, or even when lapses appear as well. And for the parents in the audience, mostly, that is definitely something that you can help with. And also helping to remind your loved one about the progress that they've made, how far they've come, and how well they're doing in their journey. That this is not easy what they're going through, but just kind of reminding them, that they are doing a great job already. Next one is expecting slip-ups. So we've talked about slip-ups can happen at any point and should be expected. This is something for both a loved one and a person on the road to recovery to be aware of. When slip-ups do occur, it's good for the individual to use the skills they've learned during treatment, and also using the relapse prevention plan to get back on track and learning from their mistakes. Just reminding yourself that most people have down days, or days when life's hassles are harder to deal with and things are just tough. That's part of being a human being, and it's important to remember that. For a loved one, be ready to provide support when slip-ups do happen, because they will. Encouraging your loved one to use their skills and use their relapse prevention plan, or the plans that you've come up with, the ones that we went through for addressing early warning signs or dealing with setbacks. Those are other plans that are important to use and remind your loved one of as well. And what Anna-Marie mentioned earlier is really encouraging new learning from any setbacks that do occur, in the hopes that you and your loved one can learn from those mistakes, and then it's less likely that will occur in the future. Okay, Anna-Marie, over to you.
Yeah. Okay, so as you know, recovering from an eating disorder is not easy, and neither is staying in recovery. So really important to be mindful that you or your loved one are not trying to overdo it, not trying to push yourself too hard too soon. Because putting too much pressure on yourself really may lead to a lapse or a reemergence of the disordered eating habits that you or your loved one have worked really hard to overcome. So it's okay if some things take time to get back to where they were before the development of the eating disorder, because a lot has happened since then. So giving yourself and your loved one as much time as you need. And so for loved ones, it's important to be patient, as well as to really praise and to recognize the progress that has and continues to be made, even when it may appear to be small steps along the way, and that you would want and hope that that your loved one would be in a better spot than they are, but just that patience and being able to praise and recognize the progress that has been made, and what it has taken to get to the spot that they are in. Okay, so like we've mentioned before, so it's likely that you or your loved one have developed a regular eating or meal plan early on during treatment. So it's important to continue to be eating meals and snacks regularly, and sticking with the meal plan during recovery is really going to be critical. So for example, this might look like eating 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks every day at regular intervals. And maintaining this consistent eating schedule will be helpful for both physical and mental progression in recovery. And so, if possible, trying to eat meals with other people as often as possible is going to be helpful. And then also, loved ones making sure to offer support at meals, especially with more challenging foods and challenging situations such as holidays, things like that. And so, for someone on the road to recovery to remember that, a car can't run without gas or fuel, and trying to remember that food is really fuel for your body. And so your body can't function without food and the energy it needs to keep going. So being able to fuel your body will help you to keep well. Go to the next one. Thank you. So it's important to make time to do something kind and rewarding for yourself every day. And this won't come easily for everyone, especially if this is something that you're not used to doing, or if you're going through a difficult time or just being busy. But making time for yourself in recovery is very important. And it doesn't have to be anything big or too time intensive. It could simply be, taking a moment to relax or to reflect on the day, or reminding yourself of what you've achieved that day, such as eating all of your meals and snacks, and or not engaging in purging behaviors, or not having negative or unhelpful thoughts about your body. So no matter what you choose, remembering that you're important and deserve to take a little time out of your day to do something important that's just for you. And so, loved ones, this can look like offering support of like offering suggestions or reminders to take time for daily self-care as well. Okay. Also can be helpful to try to get involved in a hobby or an activity that you enjoy. So, anything from playing a musical instrument to reading a book, joining a club, spending more time with loved ones, volunteering, things like that. So making time to be involved in things that you enjoy, or things that are important to you, can help shift away the focus from your eating disorder and start to help reconnect with your surroundings and people that are in your community. But also needing to balance that with being realistic on how much you can take on during recovery and not trying to do too much. So for loved ones, it could be helpful to encourage and remind your loved one of the different things that they've enjoyed in the past, that they've enjoyed doing, maybe previous to the eating disorder, and offering to maybe get involved with something new, trying something new. It often can be easier to try something new if you have a buddy to do it with. So being able to have a loved one getting involved with them could be helpful as well. Okay, and finally, so it's likely that during the course of treatment, coping strategies have been discussed and talked about and tried out throughout the course of treatment. So these could be things like behaviors, thoughts, emotions that can help you deal with a stressful or unpleasant situation, such as the reemergence of eating disorder thoughts, for instance. So some common coping strategies could be, calling a friend or taking a walk, using breathing exercises, things like that, to be able to help you in times that are more stressful. And it's also important to keep in mind that not every coping strategy will work every time or in every situation. So that's why we really want to emphasize having the idea of having like a toolbox to draw from, having a lot of different coping strategies that that individuals can pull from for different situations or different times. So, loved ones, it could be helpful to remind your loved one of the coping strategies that they have have developed that have worked for them in the past, and maybe taking some time to write some down with your loved one so that you both know, maybe in a time that's not of a high stress, but so that you both have an idea of what has been helpful in the past, so that when times do come up that are more stressful, that you would be able to remind them of what has been useful for them in the past.
Okay, I know that we're running out of time very quickly, but I want to be able to have potentially some time for questions, but we wanted to provide some additional support and resources that may be helpful. There are many more things that we couldn't fit into this presentation as well, but we'll just want to highlight a few. There's a blog post that was posted on the F.E.A.S.T website a little while ago that I wrote called Eating Disorder Relapse and How to Prevent It. That post in particular is directed more towards someone who has or has previously had an eating disorder, but it could also be very helpful for a friend or a loved one or a therapist or someone wishing to support someone with an eating disorder and support them on their recovery journey. In fact, a lot of today's presentation comes from that blog. So I'm not sure if you know about this, but F.E.A.S.T actually has an amazing array of other blog posts related to eating disorders on their website. So if you haven't already, we'd encourage you to check that out. And Anna Marie just posted the link to our blog in particular, but you can find all the rest on the F.E.A.S.T website as well. So in terms of other resources, again, I said that we don't have time to talk about all of them, but this is a great helpful online resource. This is from the Centre for Clinical Interventions. In fact, it's actually based in Australia where I'm from, but it has a huge amount of free resources and workbooks for a whole range of problems, including eating disorders. The nice thing about the CCI website is that it includes resources if you're looking for resources for yourself, if you're looking for resources for somebody else, or if you're looking for resources as a clinician. So I know we had some clinicians and dietitians, et cetera, in the audience as well. That's a fantastic resource. They've actually just recently brought out a new workbook specific to eating disorders called Break Free from Eating Disorder. And again, it has resources for yourself, for others, so for loved ones, and then also for clinicians. So take a look at that. And Anna Marie's put the link in the chat to the CCI website with all the resources. I think the eating disorder one is actually, in some cases, called disordered eating. So if you are looking for additional support or know someone who might need it, you may be interested in a project that I'm working on right now, an online eating disorder relapse prevention study. So this, I know we have a lot of parents in the audience, so I'm assuming there may be some loved ones that are under the age of 18. So if they are, this particular resource may not apply, but if you do have someone that may be interested who's over the age of 18, we have this project, and this is basically giving people access to 5 free treatment sessions that can help to decrease anxiety, decrease eating disorders, and may help to prevent eating disorder relapse. And they are compensated for their involvement. But if you're interested, the contact details are there. And I think Anna Marie is also going to pop the contact details in the chat as well. And we have some more information on our website too. And then that is it for us. Our resource references are here, and our email addresses are there. Apologies, I know that we're right just before 1 p.m, so I'm not sure if we will have time for questions, but please do feel free to email us, and everyone will get a copy of the presentation as well. And I think the recording will be put onto the website. So I'm going to stop sharing there and hand over back to F.E.A.S.T.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you so much. This was an amazing webinar. It was very different than our other webinars. It was super interactive. We have a great audience, which really helped. And also, I really love that you gave a lot of strategies, that you offered skills, tips. It was very practical. It was super relevant. And you basically gave strategies that parents can use, right away. So thank you so much. We really appreciate this. Unfortunately, we do not have time for questions. So I do apologize for that, but I always feel like when you have such a valuable presentation, I'd rather go longer with the presentation and not have the time for questions. So thank you all so much for joining us. Before we end, I just want to let you all know that, we do not charge for any of our services at F.E.A.S.T. And therefore, we do request that if you can help us so that we can keep providing these type of services for free, please go to our website and donate. We really appreciate it. And I also wanted to tell you that we have more webinars coming up. Our July webinar is really, really special and unique. It is a webinar about the effect of eating disorders on siblings, and it's actually given by a panel of siblings, which is something really new for us. I think it's going to be extremely interesting and insightful. So I really encourage you all to join. You can see that we have webinars pretty much throughout the end of the year. And we really appreciate it if you would join us going forward. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you so much to our presenters, and have a good rest of the day, everyone.